government money very well. Moving on, well, first I should say, thank you, and that's our example for step 1, check. Moving on. Today, fossil fuels aren't cheap, but if the price of fossil fuels were to reflect their true total cost, including the cost associated with carbon pollution, then they wouldn't be so cheap. So there's another role for government that we want to talk about today. We have the opportunity for legislation, whether it's price supports, taxes, whatever, to adjust the price of fossil fuels to reflect their true total cost. Then we would have a market structure which would encourage more development, more commercialization, and consumption of clean and renewable energy, because alternative energy sources can be cost competitive, especially with a little help. So with that in mind, we want to move on to step 2, and I'd like to introduce Robert Hall. Rob is a senior engineer at JPL, and also the founder of the Climate Change Symposium there. For today, not just for today, but what's relevant for today is that he's the most active member in the Citizen Climate Lobby in this area, in Pasadena, and so we're glad to have him.
Okay, hi. You're probably thinking that talk on price and carbon is about as dry as they come. And that may be so, but I'm here today to explain to you just how sensible an idea this really is. Okay, what I want you to take away from this slide today is just this single number here. 15 years is all that remains on our current combustion trajectory until we blow through the upper limit on the so-called safe level of carbon change. And you can debate on that issue whether it's that level is safe. And this is why limiting carbon is so important. Here we are now, 2013. Already the global average air temperature is warmer than it's been, well, I've got 10,000 years here, but we just heard it's maybe 800,000 years ago. Already we're warmer than that Earth's temperature in all that time. And this red line shows the projected increase in global average air temperature over the next 80 years. So this is not just about stronger storms and drier droughts. It's about the future of life on Earth. We're killing off much of the biosphere. Okay, so we need a plan to reduce carbon. A well thought out plan will stabilize the climate before reaching any tipping points. It'll eliminate energy subsidies, all energy subsidies. It'll have bipartisan appeal, and it will be as inexpensive as possible. But a workable plan has to be inclusive, and it has to be effective. So here are some climate change policy instruments. We could be overwhelmed with government regulations, or, as the economists say, if there's something that we don't like and want to get rid of, let's just make it more expensive. That's what we need to do with coal and oil. So here's a way to apply a price on carbon emissions. 2 ideas. There's the cap and trade program, which you may have heard about. And then there's something completely different, which is applying a carbon fee. So cap and trade programs work by limiting the emissions of CO2 into the atmosphere. They cap those emissions. There's an allocation of certificates that authorize those emissions. And in the case of controlling acid rain, it worked very well. But here, the cap was level. California has a cap and trade program in place for controlling CO2 now. It's called AB 32. You may have heard of that. If you want to learn more, go to this website, calcarbon-.org. But there are some problems with cap and trade programs in general. One of those problems is that external monitoring is required in order to ensure that the caps are met. Otherwise, no one knows if you're in compliance until many years later. Another problem is the carbon offset feature. This is a well-intentioned idea, but it introduces the opportunity for abuse. And there have been a lot of fraud associated with carbon offset programs in the European Union. A carbon fee, on the other hand, integrates environmental considerations at every step, because the cost of goods made from fossil fuels will be more expensive than those made with clean, renewable energy. And there are some advantages to a carbon fee. It's the least costly option of all those climate policy instruments. And one of the reasons it's probably cheapest is that the tax infrastructure is already in place. I mean, it's ready to go with just a few small tweaks. A carbon fee sends a consistent price signal to the marketplace. There are no wild swings in energy prices due to market fluctuations. And it's inclusive. It tags everybody using a fossil fuel all along the supply chain. So here's a specific example of a carbon fee plan. Call it the carbon fee and dividend. And this is how it works. You apply a fee on all carbon-based fuels. That fee is proportional to the CO2 content of the fuel. The fee is applied at the source of that fossil fuel, be it the mine, the wellhead, where it crosses the border. Those higher fossil fuel costs that will probably be passed on. And the fee rises over time. But no, renewables are not assessed this fee. So the fee incentivizes power companies to repower with alternative energies. The fee incentivizes businesses and consumers to conserve, be energy efficient, and to be energy clever. And the fee incentivizes inventors and investors to create new clean technologies. So that's the fee part. The dividend part comes with no strings attached. The federal government collects this carbon fee on our behalf, but it returns 100% of the proceeds to the people. Equal dividends to everyone, regardless of your income level. And approximately 65% of families will come out ahead in this plan. Now here's a real example of a revenue-neutral carbon tax which was implemented in the province of British Columbia in 2008. And as of this year, fuel consumption per person there is down 19%. Total emissions are down 10%. And yet the economy in BC is doing better than the rest of the country. That province now has the lowest personal tax rate in Canada, and 63% of residents support it. Earlier this year, 370 Citizens Climate Lobby volunteers from all across North America descended on Washington, D.C. They met with over 500 congressional offices, explaining to them the urgency of passing a law to put a price on carbon emissions. And this is their message. Start off with a low price on carbon and steadily increase it until climate objectives are met. An intermediate goal is to make the price of CO2 at least $100 per ton within 10 years. In the first year of this program, gasoline prices would increase 13 cents per gallon. Electricity here in Pasadena would go up a fraction of a penny per kilowatt hour. Energy-intensive goods would increase a little also. But in return, a family of 4 would receive a $650 rebate. This is how the CCL plan works over time, using a model from the Carbon Tax Center. These blue diamonds you see here represent the business-as-usual economy with no fee on the carbon. After 10 years, the price of CO2 has risen to $105 per ton, and you can see there's been a 29% decrease in CO2 emissions. And this is the carbon fee revenues raised from that plan. This bottom line represents the total revenues collected by the government. It's in billions of dollars. But more to the point this afternoon is this upper line here is the household dividend. And after 10 years, that dividend for a family of 4 would have risen to $4,000. So this is the takeaway points I'd like to leave with you this afternoon for a carbon fee and dividend plan. It will eliminate all energy subsidies. It'll place a steadily increasing fee on CO2 emissions such that renewables are cheaper than fossil fuels within 10 years. It'll return 100% of the carbon fee revenue to households, such that 65% or so of households will get more back than they spend in higher energy costs. And something I didn't mention is a border tariff. If we're importing goods from a country that does not have a similar price on carbon, then we will apply this tariff on those goods, such that it levels the playing field and our local businesses and industries are not disadvantaged. Thank you.
And move on to step 3 in the game plan. As markets grow with new products, or as different legislative strategies are being debated, there's a role for the community organization, an entity that's not part of government, not part of industry. Ideally, a community group can be a check and balance. They can influence government or influence the direction of industry. And they can also provide guidance and education to consumers. There are a lot of community groups here today with tables in the lobby, including the Sierra Club. And so for the next talk, I'd like to introduce Evan Gillespie. Regional Deputy Director and the campaign for Beyond Coal, and anxious to talk. So, which mic? You want this mic? You got it.
Thanks for having me. Thanks to Roberta and Rob and everybody else who put this panel together and this event. Standing room only on a Saturday afternoon is really, really impressive. And it's an impressive group. I was thinking as the people come through here and spoken, that I'd like to think my mom was proud to see me up here with all these distinguished people, but she'd probably laugh. Gosh, really, the last couple presentations have been really pressing. And I think that this is one of the few times when the crowd is actually more anxious and nervous than speakers, just listening to the information coming at us. But I work for the Beyond Coal campaign, and I hope that with this last part of the first half, can bring a little bit of hope to the room. So my role, I oversee clean energy campaigns across the West. So we are working in legislatures and in regulatory bodies across the West to help scale clean energy to beyond part of the Beyond Coal campaign. And from where I sit, I see a lot of progress, and I think we are, well, we can't do anything about the carbon we've already put in the air. I'm incredibly optimistic about the solutions that are coming forward and the pace at which they're moving. So let's start with a little bit of the good news. So the Beyond Coal campaign has 3 goals. First and foremost, stop every new coal plant from being built. Second, retire every coal plant in the country by 2030. And then as the market for coal goes away in this country, we want to make sure that the coal stays in the ground, under mountains, and out of foreign markets where it can be burned and continue to destroy the climate. So, first and foremost, 10 years ago, the Bush administration proposed 200 new coal plants. Today, 177 of those have been defeated. A handful of them, less than a handful, a couple have been built. And thanks to the regulations that the EPA put forward, we are never going to see a coal plant built again in this country. So that in and of itself is amazing. Second, in the 5-year period between 2010 and 2015, we are on pace today to retire have a third of the coal fleet locked into retirement, and we are on pace to, by 2030, have every single coal plant in the country retired and replaced with clean energy. So that's all. And then third, on the exports front, most of you may be aware of the growing movement in the Northwest to stop the coal terminals that are going to export coal to China and to India. 3 of those have already been scrapped. We just wrapped up hearings last week where thousands of people from the Northwest came out to oppose the remaining 3 terminals. So we have ways to go there, but as we do in a lot of the other fronts of this fight, but we are making progress, so that's also very exciting. Even better though, clean energy is really starting to take off. There we go. This is a quote from John Millinghoff, who's the former, most recent chair of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. You do not get to be the head of FERC by being a radical or an activist. You get there by understanding electricity markets and the industry itself. This is a quote from earlier this summer, and to me speaks to the fact that when you look at the landscape of where the electricity industry is heading, solar is the only place where it will go, particularly rooftop solar, at least in the next 20 years. So how are we doing? It took us 4 decades to build 50 gigawatts of solar around the planet. 4 decades, 50 gigawatts. To give you a sense of scale, on the hottest day every year in California, in the afternoon we use about 50 gigawatts. So 4 decades to get to where we are in California, to basically power California. In the last 2.5 years, we built another 50 gigawatts. And then over the next 2.5 years, we will build 100 gigawatts. So when we think about the hockey stick graph around CO2 emissions, this is the type of growth we want to see in the clean energy market. It's incredibly encouraging. One of the biggest drivers of this has obviously been cost. The cost of the actual hardware itself, just the panels, have fallen by 99% since 1977. And since 2011 alone, the hardware has come down by an additional 62%. So we are continuing to see cost declines. So I think one of the things I want everybody to take away from this is that this is not a technology, and clean energy is not something we have to wait for. This is not something that's going to help us in 5 years from now or 10 years from now. It's happening right now in front of us. Last month in Colorado, Xcel, largest utility in Colorado, purchased a couple hundred megawatts of solar, and in their press release announcing it, they said the reason we're doing this is it wasn't just cheaper than a coal plant, it's cheaper than building a gas plant. And that's without a carbon tax. That's just where the market is today. And so we are at, I think, a real inflection point where the cheapest thing to do for a lot of utilities is to start building solar. Now that doesn't mean we can get to 100% today or tomorrow or in the next decade. We can get started and we can start moving very quickly right now. In fact, we are. One of the biggest changes I think in the market over the last 5 years has been in the rooftop solar market, where we have seen 5 years ago, if you wanted to build solar on your roof, you had to buy it. $40,000, $50,000. Today you can do it basically for no money down from the cost of your existing electricity bill. And that's because of a new product that solar companies have come up with where they can basically put a rooftop solar panel on your roof, or a set of panels, they can lease it to you for 20 years. They own the hardware, they come out, they fix it. You simply pay the solar company a bill. You don't pay your utility bill anymore. And this has transformed the market. And one of the things we hear time and again from utilities is that rooftop solar is only for the rich. In fact, we hear from our own members. When we send out an email about a policy in Sacramento that needs to get passed to support rooftop solar, I get 3, 4, 5, 10 emails from members saying, I'd love to go solar, but I can't afford it. This is who went solar in 2012. On the left, you've got low income, so you can quibble with the categorization of low income, middle income, and high income. But you've got, this is low income, under $39,000, under $40,000, $40,000 to $90,000, and then over $90,000 average family income. This is from the Center for American Progress. And the light blue bar, that's New Jersey. The middle bar, that's APS, it's an Arizona utility. And then on the right, the dark blue bar is the California Solar Initiative, that's California. And so the people who are going solar are the middle class. It's not just a product for the wealthy anymore. And again, cost is coming down. The fact that you don't have to break your bank account, you don't have to throw out all your savings to go solar, you can go solar for no money down, is transforming the market. And that's really exciting. If you think about it, middle income family, $75,000, last 4 years have been really hard. And the fact that a family or a school can turn to solar and actually save money, put a little bit of money back in their pocket, we're creating whole new interest groups of people who see rooftop solar as not something great to do for the environment or something great to do for climate change, but it just simply helps them get by. And that is a beautiful thing. So what I don't want the takeaway from this is that this technology curve, that the advancement has been just like with cell phones or with DVDs or internet streaming and movies, where we just built this amazing thing and it just flourished. The difference between rooftop solar or clean energy in general and the transformation we've seen in how we consume media from VHS or Betamax to DVDs and now the internet. The DVD industry didn't have to fight the powerful Betamax industry. They were able to just build this thing and move forward. We are taking on some of the most influential and most well-funded organizations in the world. We're taking on the gas industry, the oil industry, the coal industry. We're also taking on the utility industry. This is just as much a threat to the utilities in their existing business model as it is to the oil or gas industry. I mean, in Germany right now, Germany last month it peaked at 59% renewable energy. And the price went down. The biggest problem right now in Germany is that as the cost of clean energy comes down, they're not actually able to recover all their costs. And we need to figure out a way to help utilities move forward and embrace clean energy. But right now, it is a threatening thing when, for the first time, you can go to Sungevity or you can go to Solar City or some local solar company, and you can get your power from them as opposed to the utility. It's a potentially very threatening thing. It need not be. But it speaks to the cultural change that I think that we have to push our utilities to go through, so that they can embrace the future that we want to see. This is a quote from Michael Peavy. He's the head of the Public Utilities Commission in California. And it speaks to, I think, the mindset of a utility right now in California and to utilities across the country, which is that this technology is now cheaper, it can help save people money. And it's not being embraced because it's simply not in their culture. We're fundamentally changing how we power our homes and businesses from a model where you turn on and off an old dirty coal plant, and that's easy for you. I mean, it's, the grid is complicated, but a coal plant's relatively easy, you gotta switch. Thousands, millions of individuals, homeowners, and businesses generating a lot of their power, getting a little bit of power from the grid at night, and then giving it back during the day, having it come from a million different sources, that's really complicated. It's a huge business opportunity for the utility industry, but it is also just a very, very radically different way of doing things than they typically have. So a little bit more good news. We spent the last 15, 20, 30, 40 years working to get to this point where we are now, we have the technology to get us a long ways of the way there. And we're starting to move. A couple quick highlights from the last month that I think people should be aware of. So last month, the Public Utilities Commission in California set forward the first in the nation storage mandate. So over the next 7 years, the utilities, and starting actually next 2 months, utilities are going to have to start buying battery storage at a scale of hundreds of megawatts. Now, we need to be doing it at the scale of tens of thousands of megawatts. But 1,300 megawatts of battery storage by 2020 is going to help break open the market when you combine with all the work that's happening in the electric vehicle market. So we're excited about that. I think more exciting is the fact that on Wednesday, Southern California Edison held a symposium at the Public Utilities Commission to figure out how they're going to replace San Onofre, one of the largest power plants in the country. They got 50 proposals from businesses and companies across the state who have models and proposals to replace San Onofre without using a single drop of natural gas. And that in and of itself is amazing. You're looking at battery storage, demand response, energy efficiency, rooftop solar, synchronous condensers, all of these, some of it very complicated, some of it very basic. But by going into pockets of Orange County and LA County and San Diego County, we've got a lot of different proposals out there for how you can actually start to phase out a massive power plant and replace it carbon-free. Now, it's particularly important that we do it with the San Onofre plant because that was already carbon-free. But the technology is there. And so the one thing, I know I'm over my time, so I gotta go. But the one thing I would really encourage you to do is if you are concerned about climate change, for me, the biggest thing you can do is work to build clean energy. It's the only thing that's gonna replace coal, gas.
This question is for Nate Lewis. How long do you estimate it will take to develop this artificial photosynthesis meeting all three of the goals?
See if I can get a card.
Cheap, robust, and efficient.
You're not going to use that card?
That's a great question.
Maybe one didn't make it, you're not gonna-
Our goal is in our first 5 years to be the Wright brothers and show we can get off the ground. That doesn't mean that we would have a commercial product after 5 years. It means we will have conceived of and shown it's possible to make a system that works this way. And then our goal is in the next 5 years to, like the first iPhone isn't the one you buy now, to make it faster, better, cheaper. And at about that point, then if we're on track, we should be able to think about having it start to commercialize on a prototype level on scale. Energy systems, just like we've seen with solar, the first solar cell was made in 1955. It's still working today, but they take 20, 30, 40 years. We've seen it with battery electric vehicles, we've seen it with fuel cells. And so if I were to say that 3 months from now, 3 years from now, there would be millions of megawatts coming out of this new technology, history would contradict that. So realism is This is the bridge that we have to build against the gap that we otherwise don't know how to cross. There are a lot of other things that we should be doing in the meantime if you want to get from here to there.
Thank you. Bob, you gave one example of a revenue-neutral carbon tax. Is that the only example?
No, there are many different examples, and there's lots of ways to work this, and that's all part of the discussion. It could be a tax swap, so rather than having this dividend check that would come out, say, on a monthly basis, you can just lower income tax levels. There's also proposals where the money could go into the Social Security Administration for everybody, and just have that there waiting for everybody, but not having us sort of pay monthly fees for it. So there are many options that are on the table. Another one, may not be so appealing to the average citizen, would be to pay the oil companies all that money. To convince them not to object to a carbon revenue bill and to eliminate. There's lots of options.
Rob, do you still have a mic? Okay. About fees and dividends, wouldn't the dividend offset the effect of the carbon fee?
Would the dividend offset the effect of the carbon?
Yeah, of course.
That's the point.
Well, Rob, this is very important. You gotta answer this. So the fee is on carbon generation. The dividend can be spent on offsetting the higher price of gas, if that's how you want to spend it, or it can be spent on something that didn't cost.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Well, that wasn't part of
So,
the question. So the fee, as I said, it comes with no strings attached. You would get a dividend, and you're free to use that money as you wish. So you could use it to continue paying the higher carbon prices that you will encounter, or you can use it to help decarbonize your own lifestyle, so that then, when you get this check in the mail, it's just, use a metaphor, pure gravy, all right? You've essentially eliminated one of your income taxes, because you're not paying for higher carbon prices any longer.
I mean, the purpose is not to raise money. The purpose is to get rid of the fossil fuels.
Right.
A lot of taxes, kind of do both. They encourage behavior, but in the course of it, they also make some money from the government. This one, the idea is, it's not
Well,
a
it's-
money-making tax.
No, it's revenue neutral, so the government's not growing. This is just, the whole point is, as I heard, is to eliminate fossil fuel use, so you bring CO2 levels down in the atmosphere. You get your choice of how you want to use that money. If you don't decarbonize, though, of course, eventually, the price of fossil fuels will be very expensive, and you will be driving yourself into a hole. So it's a smarter thing to do to decarbonize your lifestyle when you have that money coming in to help supplement those changes.
Thank you, Rob. For Evan, how do you respond to other environmentalist concerns about huge solar farms?
So I think that a couple things. So first and foremost, one of the reasons why I prioritize rooftop solar and why it's the most I'm working on it, is that we think that it's a better, in many cases, a better location. It just is, and it is also the cost difference between a large-scale solar and a rooftop solar system. Those costs are the cost difference is big. I do think that there's a lot of, there are plenty of opportunities on disturbed land. California's a big place. And there are a lot of disturbed former wildlands that are now disturbed where we are totally appropriate and perfect places to build solar. Reality is we're going to need a lot of clean energy. And so I think that there's a role for both rooftop solar and utility scale, particularly some of the utility scale, the large thermal projects that now can help store sun heat from the day and use it to power homes at night. There is a role for both. I think we've learned a lot of hard lessons over the last 5 years about how to appropriately site rooftop solar and large-scale solar, and there's been a huge amount of work put in over the last 5 years to making sure that we have no-go zones, we have appropriate zones to build solar. The good news is I think we can do both.
question for David, but it could be for any of you. Is there any benefit to planting trees for carbon sequestration? Forest Service has developed a tree list of species with greater carbon absorption than others. Would you like to answer that?
That's actually a great question. It's also a very, very, very hard one to answer. Planting more trees is better than not planting more trees, but trees are a short-term carbon storage mechanism. They'll only typically store carbon through the first half of their lives, as it turns out, in their what we would call their Wonder Bread years, when they're growing fast. We deforested the entire northern hemisphere in the last century, or actually in the 19th century. And basically to throw the wood into our coal-burning, our wood-burning locomotives and so forth. And in the 1930s, everywhere around the world, we had a little problem with drying and soil loss and things like that. People woke up and decided to go and plant trees. And in the U.S., for example, we had the Civilian Conservation Corps, which went on and planted a few billion trees, and that really made a big difference. And those trees, during the last part of our century, this latest century, were in the Wonder Bread years of their lives, growing as fast as they could, and probably had something to do with pulling some of that CO2 out of the air that they actually did. But that's a very short-term solution, and it will always be a short-term solution. We need longer-term solutions, as Nate mentioned. CO2 dissolving in the ocean, precipitating out as carbonate rock, but that takes thousands of years. There have got to be better ways to do this. Like I said, planting trees, better than not planting trees, not going to solve the problem.
I'll inject a little bit here. I think what's important is that you think about it as a system. For instance, in my house, I don't have rooftop solar, and I'm not going to put it in because I happen to have 12 beautiful south-facing trees shading my house. And for me to put rooftop solar in, I would have to cut down those trees. The house would get warmer, and I would spend all my energy that I need for my solar and my air conditioner to cool my house down. And now, that's a specific example. But the point is that I think that there are lots of things that you need to think about. It's cheaper to save energy than it is to make energy, by far. And so it's a great thing to think about clean energy and wind and displacing coal. But if we haven't conserved energy first, that's where the most bang for the buck is. And even doing these little things like putting those little foam gaskets on your outlets around your house is equivalent to an entire open window if you don't do that. Right? It's cost you $5 to do the whole thing. Of weather stripping, of doing the dual pane windows, of inflating your tires correctly. Every one of these things adds up to very large savings that it doesn't make sense to spend your money elsewhere more expensively per carbon saved when you, me, we all can do these cheaper things per carbon saved and should be doing them. That's how we can vote. We can vote with our feet, and we can do that. And then we have to vote on energy production, which is something that people can't generally affect themselves. That's a Public Utility Commission vote, that's the Pasadena Water and Power vote, or if they're going to go coal or something else. There we have to vote on energy like it's an issue that matters. And if you ask the politicians, it's not an issue people generally vote on. Right? In fact, you can't be president of the United States if you mention a bad thing about coal. Because if you look at the swing states, there's Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and, you know, the coal, right? So we have to make political decisions on this problem as if it mattered to us, and we have to tell people that it matters, and we're going to vote that way, both with our feet and in the bigger political system, and that's the way we do it.
Thank you very much. We're going to take a break, but before you go, there are some people that I did not get signed up because the presentation had started already.